With Ontario elementary teachers on work to rule and another day-long walkout for high school teachers today, pressure on all sides to get a deal mounts. It only adds to the existing sense of urgency to get better outcomes, particularly in math, for kids from kindergarten to grade 12. With us now on Getting from A to Z on some of that, we welcome Annie Kidder, Executive Director, People for Education; Karen Robson, Associate Professor and Ontario Research Chair in Educational Achievement and At-Risk Youth at McMaster University; and Caroline Alphonso, Education Reporter for the Globe and Mail, and we are delighted to welcome this side of the table back to TVO.
Thank you.
And you here for the first time.
Thanks.
Glad you could spare some time for us. Caroline, get us started. Stuff happened today. What happened today?
So today, a number of high school teachers and education workers walked off the job. This is the second time they have done it in a couple of weeks. So we had 9 boards affected by the walkout from the OSSTF, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, and we had a number of French Catholic boards affected as well. Elementary Teachers Union of Ontario, they are on a work to rule. They're on phase 2 of the work to rule that started yesterday, which means that a number of items, but a couple of them include no new field trips, no planning of new field trips, and also no collecting money for school-based activities. So and then we have the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association that are in a position to legally strike.
But have not yet.
But have not taken any action as yet.
Okay, that's a good summation of where we're at right now. The last time you were here, which I guess was a couple of weeks ago.
It was.
You said there were still several large irritants outstanding between the two sides, the Ministry of Education and the various teacher unions. Do you think, or have you heard, whether they've made any progress on any of that since then?
None.
None? Yikes.
None. The two sides, especially the High School Teachers Union and the government, are very far apart on these issues. They're far apart on issues around online learning, the mandatory online learning courses that students will be required to take in high school. They are far apart on class sizes, and they are far apart on compensation. So no progress has been made, and no talks have been scheduled between those two sides.
Annie, can you give us sort of the historical perspective on this? Because I think all the unions simultaneously are in a legal strike position right now, which I'm not sure has happened in about 25 years. It's been a while.
Oh, no, this has happened ever since there was provincial bargaining. So probably the last 3 times contracts came up, everybody was in.
They're all in a legal strike position
they all
at the same time.
end August 31st, and then the bargaining begins, usually.
Okay, but when all the teachers did their sort of days of action, when Mike Harris was premier, this is back in the 1990s, and everybody went out all at once. I mean, can you compare sort of the tone back then with the tone today, back then with the expectations today?
I think it's a great question, because I don't think it's quite the same. There was a sense that's part of how People for Education was founded, because we went, maybe there needs to be a kind of voice, an objective or independent voice in the middle. But I think that back then there was a sense of a kind of overall, a little bit, an attack on the public sector, or on a number of different things. So there were days of action. There were hundreds of thousands of people having strikes. I think that right now the kind of a little bit of a shock to the system came in the spring when the government announced funding and made very substantial cuts to education. So, and to me, that's still what it goes back to. It's still, a big part of the conversation right now is, can you take nearly $1 billion or more than $1 billion, depending on whose estimate, out of the education system and continue to have good results, continue to modernize, as the province talks about it. So I think that a large part of what's happening right now still goes back to those announcements in the spring. And I don't think it's not the same in terms of the kind of level of attack, but it is a shock, I think, to the system in terms of, and we've seen it, ever since then, in terms of kids losing course choices that they'd had before, boards, all of them saying we've really got a problem here in terms of having fewer teachers in schools.
Let's focus on one group in particular, and this is what your area of research is. These are kids at risk. Can you tell us whether you think any of what you've just heard Caroline describe, all of the different work to rules and the difficult negotiations going on and the lack of progress, can you tell whether any of that is having an impact on the students who you are the most concerned about?
Well, I couldn't tell you if that was happening right now. I would imagine it's affecting all students. It's affecting parents who have nowhere to put their kids on days of action. But I think the bigger question is, what is the impact on these kids if these changes that the government is trying to push in actually go through? There's no research done on e-learning in this age group, so we don't even know if it's a successful thing to try out on these groups. We know that one thing for certain, it's going to cut down on teacher contact hours, and teacher contact hours are the most important thing for children who are at risk. We also know that class size, anything bigger than 22, research has shown, is detrimental to overall academic achievement.
So you're not giving any sort of credit to the government for starting at 28 pupil-teacher ratio across-board average and moving to 25?
No, I think that was a red herring. I think they meant to do that the whole time and make it look like they were trying to give some big concession.
They did the same thing on the online courses. They said we're going to have 4, and now we'll just do 2.
Yeah.
Same deal.
I think so. I think they made it look like, oh, well, we're going to meet you halfway, but really they're not. They're still making these moves that really are contraindicating what research on children has shown to be what's good for their learning.
In your reporting, have you been able to discover yet whether any of what's transpired over the last month or so has had an impact in the classroom?
Well, the class size issue has had an impact on the classroom. So the number last year was an average of 22 to 1, 22 students to 1 teacher.
In high school? In
high school. And so when the government had said that boards had to move to 28 to 1, a lot of boards scrambled over the summer months to start making that move. And the impact was, a lot of these elective courses that kids take, not the compulsory, but the elective courses, a lot of boards did scale back on those. And we saw that happen right across the province. And they were moving towards that number. So that definitely has an impact on, what kids would choose to do following high school for post-secondary, for their post-secondary lives. So yes, we did see an immediate impact come September on some of their plans.
It would only be natural, Annie, for students hearing either on the news themselves or hearing from their parents that all of this is going on, and therefore there would be discussions in the classroom with their teachers about it. Do we know how much of that goes on, or whether it's appropriate, or whether teachers try to obviously get students on their side by letting them know what's going on?
I don't know if we can know that. Certainly it's, a discussion I'm certain that's happening in families, especially for high school kids who aren't in school today. But I think that there's, it depends on your family how much of a political discussion is there. Teachers are saying they're trying to keep it out of the classrooms. But there have been pickets, so kids are obviously aware. And I think that, and that there is a little bit of, when you think back long time ago to, more than 20 years ago when it was a little bit like this. I think that one of the things we have to be careful about is is how that's kind of unsettling for kids, that they do have to think the grown-ups kind of have it together here, and that they're thinking about education. And I guess for me, I always worry that in these times of semi-crisis, there's a kind of in the meantime problem. In the meantime, how are we thinking about how education needs to evolve? Or the government talked about last year, modernization. What does that mean? And in the meantime, what are the kind of educational issues that we need to be looking at and thinking about? And I think that for kids, a few little disruptions are okay. The kids from those many years ago went through, some of them, all of high school with no extracurricular activities. That was very, very hard on them. But I think that I feel like this is based on no evidence, that right now people kind of understand this is going on, this is a negotiation, and nothing seems that terrible, except for the loss of course choices. And I think that we really have to pay attention. To me, the class size thing is kind of a red herring, because it's really about how many teachers, and this is still cuts to, we estimate more than 3,000 fewer secondary school teachers in Ontario, and it does mean that you don't have those choices. And if we think about the world now and the kind of non-linear paths everybody's on, it is really important that kids in high school be able to keep all the doors open for as long as possible. And the cutting of teachers starts to close those doors in high school. It means boards don't have the flexibility that they'd had before to provide some really, really small classes and some big classes in other areas.
What do you think the biggest problem with the Work to Rule campaign, with the unrest in the labor unions versus the government? What's the biggest problem right now as it relates to the students?
I think it's just the uncertainty of not knowing what they're supposed to be doing, especially students that are approaching graduation, how to get all of the things they need to get together to have the best application for post-secondary. I think that is really concerning probably for grade 11 and grade 12 students right now.
Well, lest we get overly obsessed with the labor unrest that's happening right now, because it's a big deal and obviously we want to talk about it, and we have, we should also point out that earlier this month, Caroline, something called, I think it's the Program for International Student Assessment, the Pisa Scores came out.
That's right.
And the Pisa Scores, which are, some way of measuring how well students are doing all over the world, they came out, and what do they have to say about how students in the province of Ontario were doing?
So the Pisa Scores measure countries, 15-year-olds. They test 15-year-olds on reading, math, and science. And this year, the focus of PISA was on reading, so how kids read and how they interpret what they're reading in a test. Math and science was also tested, and Canada generally does pretty well as far as PISA goes. Canada's normally
Very
among the,
well.
Okay,
Pretty well or very well? Okay.
Very well.
Canada's usually in the top 10 for
In the world?
In the world, measured against other OECD countries and economies, 70 odd countries and economies. And they do, Canadian students do well in reading, math, and science. Everybody has gone down in reading. All OECD countries have gone down since 2000 in reading. Canada still has maintained its level, but it has gone down. Some have indicated that is a cause for concern. Maybe we should look at that. What is happening? That kids are not as engaged in the reading material. Math has always been a concern. A lot of countries are now catching. Not a lot. A few countries are catching up with Canada as far as math scores go. And math has been a huge debate here in the country on how we teach kids the subject. So we're starting to see some concerns in those areas as far as PISA goes. Nevertheless, Canada does do well when it's compared to other countries.
I hear very well, actually.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give Annie that.
No. Well, I think it's important that because there's a narrative out there. I will always remember when it was declared a national emergency, Canada's the shift in Canadian math scores by John Manley, and you kind of worry about how we react then to something like that, and it makes people forget. The Ontario Public School Board Association just did a survey, and they asked Ontarians how they thought that Ontario students scored on international tests. And I think more than 70% said maybe average or below average. So out there in the world, there's a narrative that we don't do well, when in fact, I think Canada was number 2 in reading or something like that. 4. Caroline knows that part. But in the top 10, and we've always been in the top 10. And in math, when it was declared a national emergency, I think we went down to 13 and then back up to 10 again. So I think what we have to do is be careful of reacting to these things. And I think that sometimes the reaction, because of a kind of public love of I can understand everything about education from a kind of up good, down bad graph, we have to watch that when we're thinking about education policy or what we do in reaction. But I think it is really important to remember now in these complex times that we're in, that in fact students in Ontario, because we have enough people in Canada to actually be able to disaggregate the data and look at the provinces, students in Ontario are doing very, very well. The graduation rates are higher than ever. Our students are scoring well, the 15-year-olds on all the tests, including math, and that maybe we should be thinking about that. Is this a time when we want to start taking things out of the system, or do we want to make sure that we understand why students are doing well and to ensure that those supports and resources are still there?
Karen, do you find the PISA scores useful or valuable information?
I personally don't. I don't really understand the point of comparing Canada to Macau.
Yeah, that's
Macau
a good point
is
too.
smaller than Mississauga. And Macau is being celebrated as being this bastion of learning right now, and I don't understand why we should care about that. Other countries that are doing well, that's great. I don't know what we have to offer in terms of comparing ourselves to Singapore. These are all very less diverse cultures, very small populations. What we should be doing if we're doing anything with these results is looking at Canada and the changes over time instead of putting us out there and going, oh, we're better than Estonia this year. I don't think that's useful. But one of the things that is not being highlighted in that report, and I actually made the graph last night because I thought I was so annoyed by it, was how much Canada's math scores have gone down since 2000. In that report put out by CMEC, they only put the last 3 data points in, so it looks like it's only shifting a bit. But if you put in from 2000, it's about a 20-point drop, which is concerning. What does this mean? So who cares how they're doing in Macau or Singapore compared to Canada? What is going on with Canadian math, I think, is the bigger question, and why is it plummeting over time?
So we should worry less about how we're doing vis-a-vis Finland and more about the fact that today's students are not doing as well as they did 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And also, if you want to compare these other societies with us, you also have to look at their infrastructure. If you're worried about Finland, well, okay, then put 50% taxation on everybody's income and you'll have a wonderful school system, absolutely. But that is not what is happening here. So it's very pointless, I think, to make these comparisons.
Anybody want in on this?
No, I agree. I mean, I think the trend of how Canada has done, because we have now data points from the Pisa scores. We have, it goes back to 2000 and how Canada has done in reading and math. And you're right, the CMEC, the Canadian Ministers of Education of Canada, limited it to, I think they used 2009 to 2019, and they're like, well, we didn't go down that much. You know, we went a couple of points, but PISA gives you a portrait of how Canada does over a lengthy period of time, and math scores have declined. And I think, as concerning as Annie says, you know, we shouldn't look at these data points, but we should act. We should look.
Yeah.
But you know, there is a snapshot there. There is something happening with how kids are learning math from 10, 20 years ago, and something is going on that we need to change. And this provides some evidence around that. I mean, Ontario has, the minister has promised to look at the elementary school curriculum, and there's going to be some sort of rewrite coming out next fall on the math curriculum. Other provinces are also looking at curriculum. They're looking at class structure. New Brunswick is looking at how to structure its classroom. There's a lot going on, and I think these test scores, I mean, they're just a snapshot in time, but they do provide some information because we don't have anything else.
But I think that, I mean, I guess for me, I think it is absolutely true that we have, that we do have to look over time, and we do have to understand, so in the last 10 years, what has changed? Because sometimes there's a bit of a simplistic reaction to the math scores to go, it's all this, it's the evil discovery math, but actually that's been the same for the last, so what has actually changed? And my only worry about it is, again, the kind of, a narrow reaction to it. And when we think of the world right now, it is 2019, we went back to look at, you know, where did that term, the 3 R's, come from? And when did we start focusing on that? And it came from an British industrialist in 1796, decided this was the most important thing we needed to do in school. Well, it's 2019, the world's a lot different. So the worry is about the scores, even though I think having data is incredibly important, and it's incredibly important that we look at it and understand it in a nuanced way, that we also have to be careful, though. Even the OECD, I think it's, what's his face? I can't remember his name.
He's changed.
The OECD guy said, you know, what's easy to teach and easy to test and easy to measure isn't necessarily the most important thing in education. So it's easier to look at those things, but we have to make sure that if we think about the complex world kids are going into, or all the different kinds of jobs, that we're ensuring that they're getting, you know, the broad range of skills and competencies.
Can I pick up on that? Because, you know, in our last 5 minutes here, I want to really go up to 30,000 feet and ask the big question, which is, you know, to the best that I understand this, the K-12 system in which our kids are enrolled at the moment is supposed to set them up for a successful run, should they choose to, in post-secondary and then beyond. It's to set them up for life. And the question is, how well does this system, as we have it currently constituted, do that? You spend time looking at data, trying to do research, trying to understand whether or not we have a good answer to that question. What do you think it is?
Like as it relates to PISA or?
Generally speaking, how well does our school system set kids up to succeed in post-secondary and beyond?
Well, there's two answers to that. There's one is my experience as a professor in teaching, and then there's what the research shows, which is very little because it's very difficult for us to tie these sorts of data into any post-secondary results. It's virtually impossible at this point in Canada, at least in Ontario. From a professorial position, I think that my kids, as I call them, come in being really good at some aspects of writing tests, for example, like standardized tests.
Because they've had experience at that.
Because they have really good experience at that. But when you ask them to do things out of the box, like critical thinking, it becomes a problem. I mean, you can teach these skills, and that's what universities should be doing, but I'm not sure that they're getting enough of that to prepare them for post-secondary education. I think they expect a multiple choice test, an essay that follows a rubric, and anything that deviates from that is very problematic.
And do you have actual data that, I mean, this is your anecdotal experience.
No, this is my anecdote, 100%.
But we don't have data that would
No, I
help
mean,
confirm that.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole. I think that's
But
coming up.
but it is, you know, one of the problems in K-12 education, and we're lucky, we have an incredible system in Ontario and in Canada, is that we actually spend a lot of time measuring. It sort of measures itself in and of itself, and we don't have very good mechanisms for understanding and tracking kids all the way through. So to try and understand whether or not kids are getting all kind of those complex or whatever, the competencies and skills they need for success in the world as it is today, and whether or not we can know. Right now, you can't even know, you know, because we can't share, the data's not shared between post-secondary and K-12. In Ontario, even in one government, they won't talk to each other about the data. So it's really hard to know as a kid goes through right now, how do they end up, and how are we looking at their success overall in terms of their health, their employment, their civic engagement, whatever we want to look at, how they're doing as kind of human beings in the world. So it's problematic because it is, you know, their experience while they're in school is important, but it is partly preparing them for life. And how are they doing at life? We don't quite know.
Well, you do know colleges and universities are very quick to boast that if you get a college degree or a university degree, there is empirically provable evidence that it will lead you to a job in your chosen field. And I forget what the numbers are right now, but they're high, 80, 85%, 87% of people who get a college or university degree go on to get a job in their field of interest. That's pretty good information to have. Do we have comparable information about how well K-12 sets up our students to be successsive in post-secondary or life beyond?
Other than graduation rates, I don't think there's any material out there. I mean, I've heard of universities in their first year helping high school graduates, guiding them in how to write essays, for example.
Oh my gosh, like theoretically, you should have that nailed down by then, don't you think?
Maybe you're not receiving the skills in high school, and there's no measurement of that is the issue, right? Other than that 80% graduation rate that we get in Ontario or higher, we actually don't know what else is in there. There's no other data points in there. There's just that one graduation rate, so we don't know.
Do other provinces do it and we don't?
Not that I know of.
Well, there's better.
Who does that?
BC has a very, very robust, incredibly detailed data set that their Ministry of Education has from the time you get involved at any aspect of education there all the way into the labor market.
So why don't we do it? Well, you're smiling.
Nice face.
Why don't we do it?
Why don't we?
What inference are we to draw from that smile?
That I have been crusading for this for some time, and every time you try to ask people for this information to answer this question, you get a series of answers that are unacceptable.
From whom?
Well, let's say you're at one of these meetings like we had yesterday at HECO, and somebody...
HECO is Higher Education,
Higher Education
Quality
Council of Ontario. and some ministers, some like representatives from MTCU or Ministry of
Ministry
Education.
of Training Colleges and Universities.
Yes,
We hate acronyms here.
Sorry,
You got to speak English.
I'll stop being all hip and cool with my slang. But you talk to them, they have that data. All of the schools, all of the colleges, all the universities have to report to them as a matter of policy. You must. They have it all. But they won't release it because one of the narratives around this is that it's simply too dangerous to release anything that has to do with the Ontario education number.
Dangerous in what way?
Privacy concerns.
Is that legit?
No.
No.
It's completely ridiculous because every other country does this. There is no scandal involving children being exploited for the purposes of data. It's just, it's all caught up in some sort of legal
But it's also
minefield.
like two ministries in one government
Yes,
not
they
sharing
won't
the
share it
data
even
with
between them.
each other.
Education and colleges and
Education, yeah.
universities.
No, don't
okay,
share it.
I got a
And
minute
in-
left. Can you answer this question?
Yeah.
How are we supposed to make good decisions on good policy if we don't have data?
Well, it's hilarious because it is incredibly important, and it doesn't sound that sexy to talk about data, but in fact, it is important that we're making decisions based on evidence. If we don't have the evidence, it's really hard to do. And you're right. We know 86% of kids graduate. So what? What does that mean? What are they graduating with? And how are they doing after that? And it is incredibly important that we have that. Manitoba, everybody gets one number when they get born, so you can compare health and education data too. And it's incredibly important that we understand that.
I feel that there's so much more to say, but that we're out of time. Would you come back again?
Yes.
Did you enjoy yourself here?
It was great.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
I would love to talk more about data.
Okay, we'll do that sometime in the future. In the meantime, that's Karen Robson from McMaster University. She's going to come back and talk data with us at some point in the future. And Caroline Alphonso, who's practically my co-host because we talk about labor issues so much here lately.
More to come.
From the Globe and Mail, keep an eye on her dispatches as the labor unrest continues in the province of Ontario. And there's Annie Kidder, People for Education, who's only been keeping an eye on the education system for how many years now?
23?
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.